Jerusalem is speaking something. Floods tore through Jerusalem, and multiple cities trapping drivers in their cars, ripping apart roads, and claiming lives in scenes no one expected to see in the Holy Land. What was once unthinkable suddenly became reality. At the same time, something even more unsettling was happening. A perfect red heifer was approved, a ritual act spoken of in ancient scripture, one that many believe marks the beginning of the final preparations centered on Jerusalem. Then reports began circulating that the Golden Gate, sealed for centuries, is showing movement, a gate directly tied to messianic prophecy. And now, claims surrounding the discovery connected to Jesus' tomb are reigniting questions.
Hey, Di.
So people wondered.
Yeah, I just let the laptop charge for 20 minutes and it's got enough power to let me go. It's still only on 15%, but it gets, even though I use it, it gets stronger as I go. So I'm safe now. I won't run out of power.
Why is all of this happening now?
Yo! Yo!
Storm Byron battered Israel, unleashing torrential rain, flash floods, and powerful winds that swept through Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, and at least 8 other cities. What followed was chaos on a national scale. Highways and major roads across central Israel turned into rivers, trapping drivers inside their vehicles. Emergency responders were dispatched nonstop as people were stranded in floodwaters, some rising above the wheels of their cars. In cities like Yavne, at least 18 people were rescued from vehicles stuck in severely flooded areas. The situation deteriorated so quickly that the Israeli government declared a state of emergency. Floodwaters invaded homes, streets, and even commercial spaces. Shocking footage showed water pouring inside a major supermarket, forcing its immediate closure. Tel Aviv's promenade flooded, while emergency crews were seen rowing through submerged streets in northern and central cities. The storm left a trail of injuries and death. In Rishon LeZion, strong winds uprooted trees, injuring students in a schoolyard. Overnight, temperatures dropped sharply below 10 degrees Celsius, and amid the freezing rain, a man was found dead, showing signs of severe hypothermia. His death came directly after Storm Byron made landfall. Across the country, hundreds were injured, dozens rescued, roads collapsed, fences fell, and infrastructure strained under rainfall, reaching 100 to 150 millimeters in just hours, amounts that drainage systems simply could not handle. And this wasn't isolated. Heavy snowfall blanketed Mount Hermon, hail struck Jerusalem, and flooding spread from the coastal plains to the desert regions. Even beyond Israel, Gaza was overwhelmed, with thousands of distress calls from people living in tents and temporary shelters, unable to escape the cold and rising waters. The Bible speaks about this moment in Psalm 93-3. The floods have lifted up, O Lord. The floods have lifted up their voice. The floods lift up their roaring. We are warned about shaking times, times when creation itself seems to testify that something is wrong and something must change. After generations of waiting, searching, and sometimes even doubting, the unthinkable has happened. A perfect red heifer has officially been approved for sacrifice. For those who aren't familiar, the red heifer isn't just a random animal in Jewish tradition. According to Numbers 19, God commanded that a flawless red heifer, one without blemish, never yoked, must be sacrificed outside the camp. Its ashes were then used to purify people, especially those who had come into contact with the dead. Spiritually, it was the only way to cleanse the nation before approaching anything holy, especially the temple. And now, for the first time in modern history, that ancient ritual is close to becoming reality. The reappearance and attempted sacrifice of a perfect red heifer is totally fit Jesus' plan for Jerusalem. 5 perfect red heifers were brought from Texas to Israel. They were kept under constant supervision,
Like the 5 wives
because even a single white hair would disqualify
with the
them.
short wicks.
These heifers were widely believed to be the final missing requirement for ritual purification, the very first step toward rebuilding the third temple in Jerusalem. Then, not long ago, an announcement shook religious communities worldwide. One of the original red heifers had been sacrificed in Israel. Although the ritual did not fully meet Jewish oral tradition requirements, many believers saw this moment as far more than a failed ceremony. They saw it as a sign, a signal that God's plan for Jerusalem is quietly, but unmistakably, being set in motion. According to the book of Numbers, this ritual is one of the most sacred and rare commandments in Jewish law. Since the time of Moses, more than 3,500 years ago, only 9 red heifers have ever been considered valid and sacrificed. The last one occurred before the time of Christ.
To prevent this, the Muslims sealed the gate during the rule of Suleiman.
Here you can see the U ahead and above.
There's a gate in Jerusalem that has been sealed for nearly 500 years. But now, something strange is happening. For centuries, the eastern gate of Jerusalem, also known as the Golden Gate, has stood completely sealed. No one has entered through it. No one has dared to open it. Stone upon stone, it was shut tight in the 1500s by Sultan Suleiman the Magnificent, supposedly to block the arrival of the Messiah. And since then, it hasn't moved. Not once. Not even during earthquakes, wars, or restoration work around the old city. It has remained silent, still, untouched. But now, things are changing. Recently, some claim to have seen
welcome
stones
back.
subtly shifting. Others say they've heard faint sounds movement coming from the sealed gate itself. And while many dismiss it as wind, old age, or tricks of the camera, the timing is too eerie to ignore. People have started asking the same question. Is the gate really moving? And if so, why now? Some of the videos show what looks like a slight opening between the ancient stones, almost like a breath being held and slowly released. Other footage, shot at different times of the day, shows light appearing through cracks that weren't visible before. Of course, skeptics are quick to explain it away. They'll say the structure is old, that time and weather eventually caused cracks. But those who know the prophecy, those who've read
it just happens to be this year. That's a difference.
Ezekiel, who understand the sacred geography of Jerusalem, they're not so quick to shrug it off. Because according to prophecy, that gate is meant to remain shut until one moment in history, the return of our Father. Jerusalem is an ancient city that holds endless stories and incredible importance to many people. The Eastern Gate is located on the eastern wall of the old city of Jerusalem. The Eastern Gate leads to the Temple Mount and faces the Mount of Olives. The Eastern Gate was destroyed by the Romans at the time of the destruction of the Temple in 70 AD. It is regarded as a holy site by the world's three major religions. Each year, pilgrims from all three faiths travel to the old city to see this wall and its magnificent Eastern Gate. The beautiful Gate of Mercy is the only gate on the eastern side of the Temple Mount. It is one of only two of the ancient gates that offered entrance from the eastern side into the old city of Jerusalem. It has been consistently walled since medieval times, fulfilling the prophecy recorded in Ezekiel, where the Lord reveals to Ezekiel that the eastern gate will be closed and will not be reopened until Jesus' second coming. Zechariah 14:3-4 mentioned that his feet shall stand in that day upon the Mount of Olives, which is before Jerusalem on the east. And the Mount of Olives shall cleave in the midst thereof the east and towards the west, and there shall be a very great valley. And half the mountain shall remove toward the north, and half of it toward the south. On the north, south, west, and east sides of the Temple Mount are 8 gates into the old city where the 2 Jewish temples once stood. But only the east gate faces the Mount of Olives to the east, but it is now sealed shut, the only permanently closed gate in Jerusalem. Why is that? After all, the eastern gate gives the only direct path to the site where the Jewish temple once stood, and while this gate was built,
I was never here. I'm only starting to learn about the Tartarian Empire. I never realised it existed, but there's sort of Tony, the guy we watch. I usually finish with Tony. He believes we've already gone through the 1,000-year reign. I think he's incorrect there.
in the 6th or 7th century AD,
But he pushes the Tartarian Empire's already come and gone.
it is believed Jesus first actually entered the old city of Jerusalem through an eastern gate that preceded this one. Ezekiel 43 continues to tell that the glory of the Lord came into the house by the way of the gate, whose prospect is toward the east. What amazes us is the accuracy of biblical prophecy. The book of Ezekiel was written in approximately 593 to 571 BC. This was almost 600 years before Jesus was even born. Yet it prophesies that Jesus will not only re-enter Jerusalem through the eastern gate, but that the gate will be sealed before his return and then opened for him. For centuries, it stood sealed, hidden deep within the Church of the Holy Sepulchre.
Oh, maybe that's what he says. He says it's a fight between 2 dragons who gets to rule for 500 years. And one of them's a red dragon. And I'm not sure if the other one's a black or white one.
In Jerusalem, the tomb believed to be the final resting place of Jesus Christ. Revered as one of Christianity's most sacred sites, it remained locked beneath layers of marble, time, and theological debate until now. A team of scientists, archaeologists, and religious scholars were granted access to open the ancient burial site, something not done for nearly 2,000 years. What they found wasn't just dust and stone, it was something far more profound. Could this centuries-old tomb hold clues that confirm the most pivotal event in human history? Could it offer tangible evidence of Jesus' burial, or even whisper truths about the resurrection? As the final slabs were lifted and the veil of time slowly pulled back, the world held its breath. What secrets had the tomb guarded all this time, and why is this discovery now challenging everything we thought we knew about faith, history, and the death that changed the world forever? A team of scientists, archaeologists, and religious scholars, including experts from the National Technical University of Athens and the National Geographic Society, came together with one shared goal: to study, preserve, and uncover new insights into one of the holiest sites in human history. But this was not a normal excavation. The Church of the Holy Sepulchre is shared by multiple Christian denominations, each with centuries of tradition and ownership claims.
Okay, just so you know, Jesus isn't buried there. We know where he's buried.
Change, especially to the tomb, required years of delicate negotiations. Eventually, a rare agreement was reached. The tomb would be opened, not to disturb, but to protect it from collapsing, and to better understand what lay within. The tomb had been sealed with a lead-lined slab and covered in thick marble cladding to prevent looting, weathering, and decay. No one alive had ever seen what was inside. Would it simply be a dark, empty chamber? Or could it hold physical evidence of one of the most powerful stories ever told, the death and resurrection of Jesus Christ? This tomb had survived destruction by invaders, fires, earthquakes, and centuries of religious conflict. And yet, it stood again and again, rebuilt and reclaimed by those who believed. Just like the resurrection story it symbolized, the tomb's survival echoed a message of renewal and unshakable faith. And then came the moment the world had been waiting for. Under the direction of renowned restoration expert Antonio Moropoulou, the team began the painstaking process. The structure encasing the tomb, known as the aedicule, was badly damaged. Cracks lined the walls, and the metal supports from previous restorations had corroded. Every piece of old mortar was removed by hand. Titanium supports were installed to stabilize the structure without damaging the ancient stone. But the most delicate task still lay ahead: lifting the centuries-old marble slab that had sealed the burial bed. The team knew the risk. The marble was cracked, fragile, and irreplaceable. And then, finally, it happened. Beneath the top slab, they discovered something unexpected: a second layer of marble, etched with a faint cross. Experts believe it was carved by crusaders during the 12th century, a silent mark of faith left by those who risked everything to reclaim the Holy Land. That carving added not only spiritual meaning but historical weight. And then came the true revelation: a limestone burial bed, carved directly into the rock of the cave. According to John 19:41, Jesus was laid in a new tomb, in a garden cut from rock. This limestone surface matched that description exactly. It wasn't just symbolic, it was geological, physical, and deeply human. For the first time in centuries, researchers laid eyes on what they believed could be the very place where Jesus' body was laid after the crucifixion. The moment was more than archaeological. It was a collision between faith and science. To believers, this discovery echoed the message at the heart of the resurrection: that death was not the end, that hope lived on, that the empty tomb was not just a spiritual idea, but a real location preserved for generations, now revealed in full view. Each layer of evidence uncovered beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre offers irrefutable confirmation of the biblical narrative. Let's walk through 6 critical confirmations, each of which strengthens the case for the accuracy of the gospel accounts. We come to the first confirmation. One of the most convincing pieces of evidence backing up the gospel story is the location of the garden itself. According to John 19:20, the place where Jesus was crucified and later buried was outside the city. That might sound like a small detail, but it actually lines up perfectly with how things were done back then. In ancient Jewish law, anything related to death, like executions or burials, was considered unclean. So those things didn't happen.
No way, they mentioned time travel. That's my favourite subject, I was never here. Time travel, it fascinates me. Well, I hope we get to see what they got told or shown.
Happen inside the city walls. Instead, They were carried out in areas just beyond the city limits. That way, Jerusalem, being a holy place, stayed ritually pure. Now here's where it gets interesting. Archaeologists recently found the remains of a garden underneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre. Not only was it a real, cultivated garden, but its location is just outside where the walls of Jerusalem would have been in the first century. In other words, it's exactly where the Gospel of John said it would be. This isn't just a rough match, it's an exact fit. The position of the garden lines up with both the biblical description and what we know from historical maps of ancient Jerusalem. That alone should make anyone pause. It tells us that the gospel writers weren't making things up or speaking symbolically, they were describing a real place. And now, thanks to this discovery, we can actually see it for ourselves. And this is the second confirmation. The tombs match exactly what the Gospels describe. So now we know the garden is exactly where it should be. But that's just the beginning. What's even more striking is what was found inside that garden, the tombs. According to Matthew 27-60 and John 19:41, Jesus was buried in a new tomb, carved out of solid rock. It belonged to a wealthy man named Joseph of Arimathea. This wasn't some random cave or a reused grave. It was freshly made, unused, and clearly prepared for someone of high status. Now, fast forward to what archaeologists uncovered beneath the Church of the Holy Sepulchre, several rock-cut tombs. But these weren't simple burial holes or natural caves. They were carefully chiseled by hand into the stone, with smooth, clean lines, just the kind of craftsmanship you'd expect for an upper-class burial in that era. This kind of design doesn't show up everywhere. It takes time, effort, and resources. And that matches exactly what we'd expect from someone like Joseph of Arimathea, someone wealthy enough to offer his own personal tomb for Jesus. So this isn't just about finding tombs in the right place. It's about finding the right kind of tombs, in the exact way the Gospels describe, newly hewn, cut from rock, made for someone of importance. That kind of detail is hard to fake, and it adds another layer of confirmation that we're looking at the real thing. And here's the third confirmation. These tombs were carved, not natural caves. This one might sound small, but it's actually a huge deal. You see, in ancient times, people were...
Diane, the key word there is first to fall. So obviously there's going to be a lot of banks falling this year.
often buried in natural caves, spaces that already existed and didn't require much work. But when someone of higher status died, things were different. Wealthy families didn't just settle for natural openings in the rock. They had tombs cut specifically for burial, freshly carved, clean, and tailored. That detail shows up clearly in the gospel accounts. Mark 15:46 says that Jesus was laid in a tomb that had been cut out of rock. Again, it wasn't a random cave. It was intentionally made, most likely at great expense. And what did archaeologists find under the Church of the Holy Sepulchre? Tombs that weren't formed by nature, but carved by human hands. You can still see the marks in the stone chisel lines, smooth edges, and squared shapes. These were made on purpose, not by erosion or chance. This tells us something important. Whoever these tombs were built for, they weren't ordinary people. These weren't cheap graves, and they weren't repurposed spaces. They matched the biblical description, perfectly purpose-built rock tombs for someone with wealth or standing. Once again, we're seeing physical evidence that lines up exactly with what the Gospels said. The more we dig, literally, the more the pieces come together. And now, the fourth confirmation. The garden's location made a quick burial possible. This next detail might seem practical, but it's actually deeply important. According to the Gospels, Jesus was buried in a hurry. It was the day of preparation. Sabbath was just around the corner, and by Jewish law, no one could handle a body once the Sabbath began. So everything had to be done fast. Matthew 27:57-60 and Mark 15:42-47 both make this clear. There wasn't much time. Joseph of Arimathea asked for the body, wrapped it, placed it in the tomb, and the sun was already going down. So the burial site couldn't be far. It had to be close enough to the crucifixion site, and it had to be available right at that moment. That's where the garden comes